So first off, thanks to Steve and all the BSides volunteers for inviting me out here. We came out from Baltimore, D.C. area. I grew up in Buffalo, so I really love Canada, and very pleased with all the Molson Canadian. You guys have at every bar here. So, I know the craft beer thing's big, but I'm old school. I still, yeah. So a little background on me, then we'll get into the talk. I came from NSA originally, spent about 12 years there. My background before that was more network engineering. So I'm not a, software engineer programming. So a lot of my take on, breaking into orgs has more to do from an IT perspective, I think. I always felt a lot of a hack is really clever IT administration. So, personal details, love skiing. Next year, if this is in January, I am here in a heartbeat. I'll come back anyway. So, all right, let's get on to it. So what I'm going to talk about today is kind of, more the maybe a little technical, a little softer side of the hacking. When we talk about IT professionals, to me, they're really like the crown jewel, for going after, because they're sensory access agents. They enable moving around a network freely. At the end of the day, they run networks, right? So we're going to talk about a little bit today some breach commonalities. So a lot of the stuff you've probably heard. There's a really nice presentation this morning, the whole blue team tactical nuke that I think covered a lot of those tactics, that could be used. But we're going to kind of cover those to, kind of compare and contrast, malware versus other indicators that are common in breach, which look a lot more like sysadmin. Then we're going to kind of walk through, to kind of take a step back and walk through some pre-exploitation research, kind of how I would go about, or really anyone, would probably go about breaking down a particular target of interest. And we'll walk through some kind of steps. It's not a live demo since off PowerPoint, but I took some screenshots of some, spear phishing and lateral movement, all that fun stuff. And we'll talk about some newer exfil methods. Maybe they're not that new, but they're useful. And then some opportunities to defend. So probably the first thing I think is really important to take a look at is when you think about every breach, most every breach you've read about in the past really 7-8 years. We always, when building cyber defense products, try to look at what's common and what's not. And whether it be the DNC breach, Home Depot, OPM, I mean, some of these are a little older, or even, what happened with NSA and the insider problem there. A lot of the activity in the breach wasn't really all about malware and backdoors. Very important to keep looking for that stuff. But there's some other good indicators that I think it's worth paying attention to. And as you guys know, in the corporate world, more and more large companies, they're just completely reliant on Active Directory, right? And that touches a lot of parts of a business. Like if you picture a manufacturer for a second, let's say they run a corporate Windows domain, maybe some cloud stuff, traditional IT infrastructure, routing, switching stuff. You will find not only security cameras, badge access, tracking on the plant floor for raw materials coming in and out, quality control, logistics, where does it go? When you start, going after that core network infrastructure, whether on the, the network side or on the Active Directory side, it's amazing how much damage can be done. And you probably saw that with, Sony and some of the Petya stuff that went on. So what I'd like to do is go through, really some of the more recent breaches. I'm realizing this slide is way too busy and hard to follow, but let's take the Democratic National Committee breach. I think, if anything underscores how a lot of the corporate breaches are going these days, I think it's that one, right? That was very much, an intrusion that definitely leveraged, some custom malware. But once they got in, right, you get in any way you can, whether it's a VPN, tricking someone to installing, a remote access, IT program, you get in, and then the game quickly turns to, some form of credential theft. And as you guys know, PowerShell is really, really important. It's almost even becoming more important, being ported over to Linux systems as well. And, whoever did that breach, was very adept at using that. So there was a lot of WinRM being used, WMIC. This is really important because you think about this years ago, an IT guy would leverage these tools to tip him off when his hard drive was filling up, or to help install utility or product. But you can kind of leverage these now to do everything from launch a process remotely next door to, enumerating the C drive to pull documents out. And so they also leverage some nice Windows management instrumentation, event subscriptions to kind of create persistence, right? It's definitely, I think you're seeing the age of lightweight, throwaway kind of remote access tools with pulling a lot of scripts and tools down into memory, off the internet. So that one I think is particularly interesting to look at, which kind of leads you to the one that got all the press, not Petya. I was writing this and I wrote ransomware. But the reality is I think it's like destructiveware, right? There wasn't a lot of ransoming going on. It was just destroying. And this hit a lot of companies like FedEx, or really their TNT subsidiary, Maersk. I think the company that owns Cadbury and some others. And the interesting component of this is I don't have direct knowledge on those specific breaches, but we know Petya had several interesting characteristics, right? So the first thing it did is it actually had an exploit, right? An SMB exploit that, frankly, we pulled it in the lab and it blue screened like 50% of the XP boxes. Worked pretty good on unpatched Windows 7. But when I see all these names and the size of the write-downs, it makes me think, sure, maybe the exploit had a little bit of success, but I suspect they had common privileged credentials on all these machines. And that's why I was able to spread so quickly. So it tended to kind of start, and I'm going to show you a little video of when we ran it in the lab. That was like within an hour of it kind of hitting the wire. We were kind of surprised because it was really cool. It's kind of tradecraft. You normally see humans executing behind the keys, and someone automated all that, right? So, it starts kind of throwing an SMB exploit, and hopefully that works. Let's say it hits a Windows 7 box that was unpatched. Then it's going through trying to rip out, privileged credentials. We see a lot in the corporate world. You'll have like help desk accounts, right? Things where they have to administer the endpoint that are kind of littering a lot of credentials around that. They might not be domain admin, but they might be common along a lot of the endpoints that allows you to spread laterally. And then it would leverage PSExec. We've seen that a gazillion times in WMIC to kind of spread. So this is a little video. Well, I wonder how I play it. Let's see. Well, maybe we have a video. Hey, there we go. So we kicked this off in the lab. This is kind of cool. Like, obviously, we left some credentials around for it to steal, but picture a company that had maybe MEDOX installed as an admin on every computer. This thing starts mounting shares right away, right? And then, so obviously it's copying its file over. And then the next thing it'll start doing is using WMIC or PSExec to remotely execute its, destructive process next door. And you can see that was real, that was live, that wasn't sped up. It's obviously a tiny network, but that would happen really fast. And I suspect that is why it really hit such a large swath of computers really quickly. This is an old one, but a good one, Target. As you guys know, they broke in. It almost, you're going to get in one way or another. It's all about what you do and how quick you can catch them once you get in. And so when these guys were in there, they kind of had a cool little piece of ransomware that would scrape memory for credit cards, right? So they'd swipe on their point-of-sale terminal. The credit card goes into memory. It was encrypted when it was written to disk, but their little piece of malware that stole the credit card essentially just scraped the memory to get the cards out. But the other thing they did is they leveraged PSExec, built-in Windows tools you see everywhere. Same technique hit by us, a company named MedStar Health. They're a big orthopedic kind of company. They repaired my knee, but they kind of had a similar issue where the guys got in, they ransomwared them, but they broke in and spread and lingered for a while, much like you would do if you were stealing IP, right? So they just kept moving until they got kind of domain admin access, and then poof, they pushed it out all at once. Petya did that automatically, which was particularly spooky. Another oldie but goodie I think is interesting to look at, because I think this is the epitome of, kind of convergence when we talk about Active Directory and core network infrastructure. So TV5, I don't know how it's French, Monde, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but they were hit by someone that claimed to be, some ISIS offshoot. A lot of people said it was probably the Russians, but what was really clever is they essentially broke in. I think they got in through some VPN access, and their goal, this was kind of a mean attack, right? It was to take these guys offline. And so they leveraged a lot of the normal stuff you see, right? They got in, they're stealing creds, they're spreading around. The thing they did, which really got my attention, and I think should, in a way serve as a warning to a lot of corporate networks, is they also, went and got a TACX server. And as you guys know, Active Directory many times authenticates users when they come onto a Windows domain. TACX is what authenticates the network engineers on routers many times. So, once they got that access, they were able to then spread around and essentially remove the OS image and the configuration on a whole bunch of routers that were feeding content live. And so if you think about it for a second, when you talk about, we're seeing more and more destructive attacks, whether it was Sony or this one, the older Saudi Aramco one. When you start combining and hitting AD and core network infrastructure, that's particularly scary because I can't think of many decent-sized companies that could even operate if either their core network went down or AD. And I think, it hasn't probably been talked about enough how much you really need to focus on your traditional IT networking infrastructure, whether that be, if you're more wireless infrastructure, focusing on control of that, your typical routing and switching infrastructure. There's a lot of that gear out there. And frankly, sometimes it's not too hard to hit. So kind of quick overview, and then we're going to go into, maybe the more personal side of building out some targeting. So, lateral spread tools we're just seeing all the time, and I'm sure all you guys are, and maybe you leverage them if you're a pen tester, defender, the PSExec, WMIC, frankly, just ripping off actual real credentials. Even the old school one of copying a file over and using a remote task scheduler, frankly, still works, right? The benefit of a lot of these live off the land or really, Windows sysadmin tools is it's very hard for AV to do anything with it. For example, when we do product demos, the malware we use doesn't pop in any of the AVs, and we've sent them the signature like 50 times, and we post it up there. It's not a knock on that. It's just kind of how the products work. Because if you built a signature or even some, kind of next-gen version that's trying to score it better, you might be popping a lot of legit Windows system admin stuff, and that's not really good for business when you're shutting that stuff down. My point of going through a few of these breaches up front is think about it. I mentioned malware, I think, with the point of sale scraping. But look, every time they were spreading malware or installing it or getting it to run, it was a whole lot of less exploiting, right? I think many times, pen testers would probably agree, you're really happy if you have an exploit, right? You get in, you get a foothold, maybe you get lucky and the company's just totally sloppy and not patched. But it's hard to complete a full objective of getting in, either stealing the exact data you want or destroying the network without doing a lot of IT sysadmin stuff. So let's take a step back, and this is kind of gets to the, the kind of main topic of my discussion today is pre-exploitation research, right? So if you think about it, if you're really going to go after a business, whether it be a pen tester or a bad guy doing it, I really think it's important to start with a lot of social network analysis. The big challenge with businesses in cyber defense is they have a reason and a need to communicate with the outside world. They're a business, right? We do. Everyone else that runs one does. And the challenge is, it's a lot different than trying to find one guy or one entity that doesn't want to be found. And so what I think is, a decent model is I like to break up, your kind of target you're going to go after into three just basic buckets. If I'm going after data, I want to essentially do as much pre-research work. You could be calling people and tricking them to try and get this info, but I want to build the best social network of data creators. So if I'm going after a manufacturer and they make a particular widget, and it's something I want to steal their IP, I need to really understand who are the key engineers. Well, you can imagine good places to go to start figuring that out. Job ads, LinkedIn, right? You start piecing together a network of those people you want to get to ultimately. Now, you might try and go direct to the data creators with a spearfish or something, but you have to assume a lot of times it doesn't work. You're usually going to get in one way or another. You just might not be where you want to be. So the next area is really IT infrastructures and administrators. So this is a tough area. Like I told you, I was a network engineer, working on NOC long before I went into our defense community. And this is an area where if I have to tell people what my skills are, I have to say I have experience on Cisco Nexus switches. I've done Windows Active Directory and PowerShell scripting, yada yada yada. The challenge today is where's the balance when you put that on LinkedIn? Because you're now talking about essentially the infrastructure we know if it goes down or gets impacted enough, the business is done, right? So there's a fine line. I don't think it's something where you can say no one can write anything about their skills, obviously. You don't want to hurt anyone's career or anything like that. But at the same time, they're now kind of talking about really critical assets. And a little later, I'm going to walk through some critical infrastructure examples that I found. Frankly, I didn't do that much research, but enough where, point made. So the middle bucket is IT infrastructure administrators. These are the guys that control the infrastructure that houses the data I want to steal ultimately. So they're really important too. And then lastly, this is where kind of, the con man game or spear phishing or tricking someone to install a program if you don't have a nice exploit is really kind of picking on the external facing and, not to pick on sales or marketing or even billing. That's another good area. They have a reason to communicate and field requests, right? So a lot of times that's a great area to kind of get in. So when we talk about probably some tactics you can use to reduce your exposure, it's definitely going to focus on those guys as well, because you really want to tier up your high value targets in an org for. If you're going after them, you want them. If you're protecting it, you want to have a good sense of who, if compromised, could cause you the most damage, whether it's losing IP or losing your control of your network infrastructure. And then those that shouldn't be able to create a lot of damage, make sure they're not armed with like privileged accounts on their computers and things like that. So kind of one of the first areas, believe it or not, I think people are getting a little bit better on this, but I think it's still really worth noting is, if I'm trying to figure out what a company's running, right, if I'm going to break in, I want to have a plan, because I always felt that phase, in a pen test where you land, it's a big enterprise and you might have an objective. You're out of command line mostly with some sort of remote access tool, and it's kind of challenging to start figuring out all the other subnets and components that are in the network, right? We all know broadcasts aren't passed by default, right? And subnets, basic networking. So it's not like you just learn about the other 30 subnets that you might be able to spread to. So I think it's really important to kind of go in with a game plan of, what are they running for, network authentication, right? Is it, right on the router? Is it TACACS? What kind of PBX do they run? I don't know if I'm going to do anything with it, but I might want to get into it. Firewall. Now you have many times specific ports you can kind of scan for, right? And that starts allowing you to put the puzzle together. It's really important, for hackers to kind of really be building out a map, right? Especially as you expand and you're not just doing Active Directory queries to find people in groups, right? That's very important too. But there's a little bit more. And so what I found is, and the job ads are brutal, right? A lot of people put out a cybersecurity job ad or an IT ad, and they list off the exact products you have to have experience with. And to me, I get it, right? You got to get it's hard enough to hire, highly qualified, IT folks and IT security these days. The challenge is you're essentially telling everyone on the outside what you're running, right? So that gives me a plan. If I have to look for something, I know at least what to look for, right? Instead of operating blind. So that's an area of, if there's any takeaway from kind of the job ad thing, and if you're a defender of your own corporate network, I would say at a minimum have a policy, or at least educate everyone and think through what it means when you list off all the specifics, because you really are you need those systems to operate and be up if you want to run a successful business and don't want a lot of downtime, and you're essentially telling the world what you're running. The other area, and I probably should never even say this because, I run a business now and I want people to promote our product as well. I also don't think it's good to, allow your logo to say I'm running these following products, stake a flag, and I'm sure lots of vendors don't like that. I want someone to wave the flag saying they love our stuff too, but the reality is it's not a great idea, right? If you're buying security products, don't tell the world what you're using. It's kind of silly. So, the next area I think is kind of crazy. So I was just thinking, when we're going to make this kind of presentation, what's everyone's worst fear in cyber, right? It's, oh man, critical infrastructure, power goes down. When I look at it, I think those businesses that are really most vulnerable to horrible disruption that covers a lot of, the supply chain up and down are obviously critical infrastructure. They provide the base for, modern life to operate in businesses. But then you got logistics companies. They got to get product from here to there. They're definitely an area where it's just-in-time production, just-in-time delivery. The kind of economies in Europe and here in every, kind of modern country are very much just-in-time production, delivery, logistics, and those are all enabled by what? Communications, computers, right? I think they're very vulnerable. Manufacturing's the other area. It's actually an area we try and focus on a lot. I think if you picture running a huge plant, maybe you're making a huge auto part, you might have bought a $20 million press that has to stamp a piece of metal that had NT4 bolted to the side of it. And do you think anyone wants to update that computer, right, when that press is no longer working? They don't. And so, as factories try and become modernized, one of the challenges is that it's like, oh, damn it, how am I going to upgrade all this old stuff? Because our job is to make product and get it to market, not just put the latest and greatest computer thing in there. So it's another area I think has a lot to lose. And, we were talking about this years ago, but you're starting to see the ransomware guys go after them more, right? They can really impact them. So I took critical infrastructure as an example, and I did, in full disclosure, no more than 15 minutes of LinkedIn querying. And what did I find? I find not only is there cybersecurity associations for critical infrastructure with members. Like I couldn't think, when you think about people talking about kind of some of that malware that was sitting and found in U.S. critical infrastructure, power plants, energy producers that seemed latent, that's spooky to me, right? That's probably nation states that are trying to get some latent malware in there if they ever wanted to do some damage. Well, so you have that. We know that's a threat vector. Maybe sometimes harder to pull off, actually turn the lights off than we think. But the reality is there's a driver there, and there's kind of nation-state interest in that stuff, probably. And then we have our cybersecurity professionals. It's a feather in their cap when you say, I protect critical infrastructure. We know this, right? It's very important. But boy, when you work for a specific company and you have that on your LinkedIn and you have a listing of what you do for them and you're part of this group, you're essentially just creating a big targeting deck, right? So my point to all this, so I did a little bit of research. I was basically looking for like PLC, IT security, anded with some major companies. And what do I find? IT security folks literally putting the patch version and operating system version of their, I slimmed this one down, of their mission critical checkpoint firewall cluster. Right? I'm sure that's probably not the best idea. I'm pretty sure in the hack against the Ukraine power grid, they broke into their corporate side and were able to figure out, hey, when they get over the kind of production ops side, where their important gear sits, there's a guy VPNing in. They found him, they stole his creds, they VPN'd in. It's really not good if you're the firewall guy to be telling people what you're running. But this is right in the job history, right on LinkedIn. When we saw things, implemented hardware upgrades, Checkpoint, Cisco, Juniper, Fortinet, right, and some other stuff. Again, it's too much info, right? It's really, I think it's fine to say generally what you do, but not specific. Then we have another one I find, and he's putting the exact version of the programmable logic controller that they're running. As we all know, it's kind of like manufacturing. No one wants to mess with industrial control devices that are connected, right? Because they want it to stay up. It has to stay up first. So some of them don't have really good protections, right? It might be a lot more possible to, reflash their firmware, right? They might not have cryptographic signing. You might be able to tell that to them freely. And so it's kind of a challenge. There's a balance, and I just think it's, really important to educate, kind of your tech workforce and have at least some sort of policy. That's not draconian. That's reasonable. This is our joke one, right? It's Frank Miller. We kind of use him in our fake hack here. But I can tell you, I've seen this many times before where Frank Miller, he's a Blackpoint, cyber Active Directory engineer. And then he starts listing out we're 2008, 2012 mixed environment. We use Kaseya for patch management. In my head, I'd be thinking, do I have, can I find exploits for 2008, right? Go look for those. Kaseya, oh, cool. If I hit that thing, I can install all my malware at once, right? That's what you think about when you look at this stuff. And so, we're going to kind of walk through a little bit of a kind of a hacker checklist, right? This is the same. All the breaches are almost the same. The idea is you're going to spear phish, and the reality is there's phishing, spear phishing, phishing a little more, generic, spear phishing, very targeted. It's a con man game at the end of the day. You're trying to entice someone that wants to receive your message, to open it. And you can even go so far as just getting them to install your product or your tool, right? It doesn't have to, have cool jump up code and everything. If you target enough and you have a believable enough story, it happens. The next phase, this is an area I don't think, every pen tester does this all the time, right? They're trying to find available devices to scan for and go after. But I don't necessarily see the defense world looking for this behavior quite as much, right? We all know a firewall or intrusion detection, right? If you're running, Nmap or Nessus, some sort of scanner against it, it'll light up. We're seeing an Nmap scan. But you have to ask yourself, where do those normally sit in an IT infrastructure? To me, they sit up top, northwest traffic, right? Or north-south traffic. They don't necessarily see that traffic, within a particular subnet or even within a few subnets. And so many times I think, this is kind of, overlooked as far as a detection tactic. I know it's probably, not a good company to talk about right now, but, obviously because Kaspersky's been in the news recently for some pretty bad stuff, but they got hacked as well by someone. And what's interesting is I read that whole 100-page write-up they wrote on that breach. And it was all about, this is the coolest, most badass malware we've ever seen. These are super smart guys that wrote this. But every time that malware installed itself, it scanned its default gateway using SNMP public and private. Well, if you think about that, that's only something an IT guy or a network management platform should do, right? So looking at that stuff, I would just want to know anytime someone makes an SSH connection to a network device, period. Where did it come from? Who was logged on at the time? That's really important stuff to look for because this is a phase that has nothing to do with malware. In my opinion, a lot of your incident response plan, obviously you want to detect malware, right? Because AV is the best in the world. When it catches it, it just stops it, right? There's a signature, it's known bad. But assuming you whiff on that, which all the victims, I'm sure they were running malware, right, that we read about, it's kind of what's next. This network discovery phase, I think, is kind of a hard part for hackers, right? You never know. Are they in a network and they're redirected through something and then, the laptop closes on their victim and then poof, they're gone. They're like, crap, now I got to wait for that to come back up or try and move around. So it's an area, of opportunity. The next area we'll kind of just talk about, and this is where everyone gets a lot more familiar, I think, on the pen testing side, is just the tradecraft you can use to enumerate domains, right? They're kind of like a phone book in a way. You can ask lots of questions even if you're not super privileged and get answers as far as who's in particular groups and, where might they be logged on from. So we'll kind of walk through a little bit of that. And then the lateral spreading phase, right? When that happens, it goes quick, right? Because it means you probably have creds, and whether it's a Kerberos, token or real creds or, hash or something like that. So granted, I see this slide. It's really, really hard to read from there. But on the left, what we have is really kind of the typical spear phish. I think, one thing that's not too hard to figure out is, what sales guys working with the company, what are they selling them, right? And who's buying. And so, one I think is quite effective is you go after, an entity and you hit a sales guy or marketing with a request for quote, right? From maybe a spoofed email or something that gives them a reason to say, oh man, I might get to sell some stuff today, right? Or Phil, a customer's coming for a renewal or something like that. That tends to be really good. AV and a lot of those are getting a lot better at, snuffing that stuff out, but you can still get it through, and it's really only a matter of time. So on the right side, what you can't see too well is we got a connection back. Our malware is built pretty much off everyone else's tools, so they did all really the hard work. And then we like to do things like, first thing I'm going to do is probably trace route out to the internet, right? How many hops between me and the internet? Kind of figure out some more segments. Does anything filter ICMP, right? In my head, it's like either a purposeful ACL in a network or that might be the firewall, right? That's a protocol you don't want kind of expanding outside and going into the internet, so it's something to look at. Do things like IP configs, look at ARP list to see who's next to you, all the just really basic stuff. But the hacker, when they land for the first time, they have to figure out, did I just hit someone who's at home VPN'd into the office, right? I have to figure out, is this one LAN segment on this side of the computer, their home, what other stuff are they running? Is this an Xbox or a Nest? And then how can I start figuring out the corporate side if I want to jump in? That we got to send out traffic, right? You have to. That's an opportunity. So, one of the areas I think is kind of interesting is, right, trace route out to the internet, figure out how many hops I am to the internet. That gives me one piece of information. Next thing, I'd probably ping the default gateway to see what TTL I get back. Right, that gives you a little more. Is it some sort of Windows box? Is it Linux or a network device? Then I think another area I think is really useful for the hacker and really easy for the defender to clean up is, don't let anyone from any subnet SSH to a core network device and get a response back. You should have ACLs filtering that only certain parts of the network. You raise the bar difficulty for the hacker, and you make it more, he's going to have to get over to that side of the network to interact with these devices. Like, if I suspect in the French case, if they had done some better restriction there, it might have been harder for the Russians or whoever it was to get over there and clean out some of their routers. So the next thing is the banner message of the day. I don't know who. It feels like it was probably a lawyer, but I don't know who said it was a great idea to put the banner on there to say, this is a black point, network device. Get out. Everything's logged. You'll be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. To me, I'm like, well, clearly we're breaking the law. Know this already, right? Don't care. And sweet, this is fucking black point. Good, right? I'm winning now. So it's really free to fix, and it is pretty easy to eliminate it. So think about that for a second. When you're a defender, you have the advantage, especially if you're pretty up to date and up to speed on your infrastructure. I worry sometimes, if you picture a very segregated IT and security department, security is very much like looking at, bad hashes of files, traffic, bad DNS, threat intel, logs. And when something happens, they ring up the IT guys and like, can you shut this port off or go clean this box? Sometimes you miss is the view of IT, right? Think about a knock, right? You see a big picture, right? You see health status. Like, if this device goes down, then that building's out right now. This is bad. I think it's important for the defenders to pay attention to that and have a really good, competent understanding of segmentation, filtering inside a network, and really overall the network design. So, all right. So the next step in this, right, we spearfished in. I know this is kind of lame on a PowerPoint, but spearfished in, got a call back. We have two-way interaction now. We can run commands. And what we're thinking right here is going back to our social network. All right, who are all the IT guys, right? I'd probably go and look and figure out what their email naming convention is, right? And so we look at that, and it's like, okay, his username's probably going to be the same as the first part of his email in most cases. I want to find him. So other people, way smarter than me, have created great tools to query Active Directory to look for things like net sessions, right? I probably enumerate, give me the people in the domain admins group, or hell, give me all the groups listed, right? Do I see like C-suite or executive group? That might be the way I want to go after, a CEO or something like that, or groups that, are more for the data creators, right? So the idea is we can query, and, unfortunately, there are some steps you can take, I believe, to kind of limit this in AD, but you get spit back, essentially, an IP of where that guy's account is logged on. Many times, that's when they use their highly privileged account to maybe do just, memory or disk utilization, monitoring, but whatever process is running is them, and it opens the door to steal a form of their credential. So in this example, it's definitely hard to see, but when we kind of enumerate who's in the domain admins group, you see things like administrator, fmiller, lab admin, snap admin. And then I'm looking down at my command prompt here, and I'm saying, well, I'm running as lrich. I don't know who lrich is, but that's a user. I know I want to be fmiller, right, because he's in the domain admins group. And I'm particularly interested because fmiller has the same naming convention as lrich, that to me would say this is more of a day-to-day account. Yeah, of course, we found Frank Miller on LinkedIn. Duh, right? It's pretty obvious. That's a guy I want, and this is where he is. So now this is the tricky part, and this is many times where it's like trial and error. You're hopeful maybe they were really sloppy, and the companies that got owned bad by Petya, I would probably say were really sloppy. They probably had a local admin cred that was the same on like every box. That's my guess. I don't fully know, but that's my guess. So the idea is, can I leverage one of these kind of highly privileged local accounts that are common on a few to move over? Now, obviously, it's great if you have some money exploit you can throw locally, but if you don't, you got to go back to kind of just being an IT guy. So in this case, we got fmiller, right? So the next thing we kind of do is, spread. And this is really lateral movement, right? What do we mean by that? Picture an IT guy trying to install any product, right? He's got to somehow get that installer process launched and get the installer moved over. And luckily, Windows and the domain infrastructure over the years has provided lots and lots of really nice options for doing that. Everything from the basic copy, write a script on startup to install it, or remote task scheduler. That one's pretty basic. To some of the newer ones like Windows Management Instrumentation, like the command line version, or WinRM, where you can run like straight up C# code, on the endpoint in PowerShell as well. But that's, if you look at Petya, again, it was throw an exploit, hope it works. If it didn't, I'm going to try and steal the creds locally and then use these tactics to move it over. And when you kind of make it a worm where it's able to figure out its subnet and other ones, boy, it goes really, really, really quick. And so that's a phase. I mean, I think when you think about it, most businesses catching that phase, they try and send gobs of logs back to, right, a seam. And then your hope is you can run queries on that and get a sense of what's going on. The problem is, I think, in practice, especially with the ransomware, it's too slow. It's too slow. It's too reliant on the security analyst asking the right question. And if you think about the case of a Kerberos ticket theft or duplication attack, that process that's running with the privileged account, like fmiller in this case, he kind of has a time to live on his auth, right? This thing is good by default. I think in Windows it's 10 hours, right? You can't make it too small. It screws up VPN, workers that are coming in. But what you have now is this magical little credential. You don't know the username and password. That's maybe you got it with 2 hours left. It's good to move, right? So I can take that and pass that over next door. Well, guess what? That never hits the domain controller to ask if this token's good because it's been cryptographically signed and it has a time to live essentially on it. So, this is an area where you got to really think about how many freaking logs would I have to send back to detect that, right? So it's an area where it's really important to kind of focus on those phases where bad guy's trying to figure out where he is, bad guy wants to be IT guy. And ultimately, he's going to have to leverage creds and privileged creds. And that's an area you can really kind of lock down. And frankly, in some cases, it shouldn't cost too much to do that. So moving on, really the next kind of phase, as you guys know, in the case of IP theft, is data exfil. It's already over if you wanted to destroy it, right, because you spread. Data exfil is something where, if you remember a bunch of years ago, it was like, oh, I'm going to look at all my DNS requests, and oh, look at all this stuff going to a .cn address. It's probably really, really bad. But if you think about it, as IT infrastructures are, many of them are operating in kind of a hybrid setup. The traditional on-prem, where a lot of red teamers and pen testers are very comfortable exploiting and moving around. They've now added a cloud component for certain features, and those all have APIs, right? They want the companies that are making a lot of the cloud offerings want you to be able to automate a lot of stuff. Well, picture this for a second. Picture I'm making a particular bad piece of malware, and I have it monitor some social media thing that's open for commands, right? So I'm not really behind the keys. It's in there running. I think people have definitely used Twitter for this before. And then when I exfil my data, I'm going to send it to the Google Docs API. How many people do you think can tell good Google SSL versus bad when it's so much volume in the network? It's kind of tough. So this is an area where still I would never recommend anyone not run traffic analysis systems, at the gateways. You want that data, but you have to think ahead a little bit and really think about your strategy for this API type access. As hacking moves on in the future and things get much more cloud enabled, it's going to move a lot more, probably is today, to stealing API keys, figuring out who the guy is that runs the AWS account. We did some work for a small company many years ago, more of an assessment sort of thing, and they made a really great product, right? It was all e-commerce, delivered, very clever, and we're in there talking to them, and they were really proud that they were all Macs, they had great Wi-Fi, good firewall, no real infrastructure. Our attack surface is really nothing. And so I asked him, I said, so who's in charge of the AWS hosting here? Like, who has the account to create the VMs and configure them? I do. Is that two-factor? Right? Do you have two-factor authentication on that? No. So I'm basically one cred theft away from destroying your entire company. Everything is on there. All the data is on there. The backups are on there. And that's the stuff you also have to think about as you move forward. I mean, anything that's web accessible from anywhere in the world, got to have two-factor. It's like pretty much not negotiable. There's a lot of companies, if you think about it out there right now, that still have Outlook Web Access open, right? We all know we're logging in with our domain accounts usually, and they're still single-factor. Well, I forget, I think it was Dave Kennedy made a really nice social engineering toolkit, harvester, cred harvester module that probably every pen tester is familiar with, and it's pretty easy to spoof an Outlook Web Access login. And then you get someone to log in, they put their credentials in, they hit enter, and it just kind of refreshes. You can get something by most people one time. And then the next time they enter their credentials, they're logged in, all is good. Well, you already got them. And so I think, the next phase really is I'm going to start searching for VPN and IT and, anything I can, their email to find IT guys. And I think the post-mortem on the TV5 Bond hack had the Russians searching on a wiki inside. Well, I'm assuming it's the Russians. I don't really know that, so I shouldn't say that. But, it didn't seem like ISIS. How about that? They get in there and they're searching for like SSH, TechX, VPN. I mean, that's obvious. You can do that in email too. So, like I said, I'm not a programmer, and this is not going to show very well, but Javier Salinas, our head of threat research, and one of the devs in our, basically, as if this is going to ever start. There we go. That's horrible to see. Just coded up with our demo malware, a Dropbox API exfil. I mean, it took literally less than an hour to build this and make this video. You see, it pushes your collected data up to Dropbox, and then, one thing I did notice that could be useful, I think Office 365 is probably the best one to exfil through because so many people are using it. It'd be really hard to sort out. So I asked him, I said, take a packet capture of it. You can't see it here, but it says API.dropbox-DNS. One thing to think about, and I don't necessarily know the answer to this, is I would compare that to when you have the Dropbox client installed, is that also hitting the API? Because if it is, it's going to be damn near impossible to tell if it's good or bad. If it's not, that might be an opportunity for detection, right, for your traffic analysis platforms. So, as far as defense opportunities and tactics, I think there's obviously more than this, but some basic ones. Use your own network to detect some of this just very targeted tradecraft, right? It's very simple to, send an alert to your SIEM or something like that when someone hits a core network device. That stuff's critical for your business. The security guy should know every time that happens because it's either your IT guy, and if you can't run it to ground with him, then it's really bad. Obviously the privileged activity, if there's one thing you can do to lower the bar is really make sure that there are not lots of local admin access accounts on lots of computers that don't need it. We see a lot in the corporate world. Someone wants access to they need it, right? They have to install programs, maybe their engineer with some specific program. They need the ability to install stuff on their endpoint. And so they're like, okay, and they write a GPO, and they accidentally give a whole swath of the company the ability to get admin on any computer they log into, and it's finished then. So definitely look at that. I think it goes without saying, but, patching. I know it's hard for some systems that are really critical, and it's like, crap, I know patches go bad. We all know this. But it's really, really important. Don't leave the doors open. I haven't read the Equifax thing too much, but it seems like there was definitely an exploit involved on something that probably didn't need to be there. The other thing is when you haven't, make an incident response plan and actually maybe practice it with the pen tester. See if you could actually, if someone's breaking in, you could actually catch them and stop it. Right? I think that's really important to actually practice. I think most companies don't. I think they hire a consultant. They write some sort of compliance plan. They're like, check, okay, good. They close it and they never look at it again. When something goes bad, they're picking up the phone, calling someone else. Obviously, least privilege, and then really, probably one of the main parts of this is you've seen half all the techniques are really admin stuff. Have some sort of policy or at least an education brown bag lunch day with your IT and IT security folks to make sure you're not giving up too much info. It'd be silly. Another area, these are little just kind of, in the weeds baby recommendations is one thing. We all know it's hard to figure out where you are in environment when you're the bad guy. You break in, you got to figure it all out. I can tell you naming convention of host names is something that makes it a lot easier. So if you're a really big network and you have, this building, switch 6A, which means it's on the 6th floor, at this campus, I'm like, okay, cool. At least I'm getting a feel for where I'm at. Come up with some naming convention that isn't easily human processable if you don't already know the infrastructure. I know it's hard in practice, but it makes it a hell of a lot harder. Frankly, for some of the most important VIPs, it might even be worthwhile having an account that wasn't their name so much, right? Something a little harder to understand. So you can't just take LinkedIn and when you find the guy, it's him. Because the longer you can get them to dwell, hopefully they catch them, the louder they have to be, right? If you can make it harder for them, they got to be louder. Simple logging on the ACLs when those traffic profiles hit inside the network that only IT guys should do, you got to know. Because that's really basic and easy to run to ground. I think I mentioned the message of the day banner on core network devices. And then the other things are really think about, am I done? Okay, no, sorry. Oh, I wasn't sure if I was getting the, I wasn't sure if I was getting like the hook. But the, other things like really just think about your API key management. Really, really think about that and understand how it's being used. And if you're leveraging cloud, infrastructure, really have a good sense of who's your admin, how did they log in, ensure it's two-factor in some way, and incorporate some of that into your disaster or incident response plan. What would I do if this account got compromised? How would I recover? And then just the basic, pay attention to traffic as well. I think it's really important. So I think with that is the end of my show. Hopefully I didn't go too long. All right. All right, that's easy, cool. Well, thank you very much, and thanks again for putting this on. I really appreciate the invite.